This morning his breath comes easier. He may yet live, thank the gods.
Not happy news.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Cast of Kings, a Decoding TV podcast about the HBO original series House of the Dragon. I'm David Chen, and my favorite phrase to say whenever I've accomplished something big is also, I've done it! Joining me today, she is the author of the unofficial guide to Game of Thrones, Kim Renfro.
I learned this week not to count your dragons before they're mounted.
Joining us also, she is the creator of the Jessie Gender YouTube channel, Jessie Earl.
David, you treat me as an equal, and that is why I choose to serve you.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Anyway, those are references to the fact that today on the podcast, we're going to be reviewing Season 2, Episode 6 of House of the Dragon. Starting off this episode, Kim Renfro, you're going to be proud of me. I recognize that there was a change in the opening credits of the show.
Way to go.
There is an update to the opening credits. The tapestry now includes the events of Season 2, Episode 4, the Red Dragon and the Gold, and the Battle of Rook's Rest that led to the defeat of both Aegon and Rhaenys' dragons, Sunfire and Meleys. Right at the end, after the blood
Rat
and cheese,
catchers.
The rat catchers,
Yeah.
you see like a scene from that battle. Kim, any other thoughts on this addition to the opening credits?
I thought it was interesting that even like the tapestry seems to really be hammering home the idea that Sunfire is dead. We talked about this a little bit more in the bonus episode, I believe, than our main episode last week. But yeah, that is a detail that has stuck out, I think, to book readers, and just like the vagueness of the way that Cole relayed that news of like, he was long in the dying. It's quite a phrase. And so the tapestry like really puts like Sunfire and Meleys both in this like, like belly up, they have fallen from the sky.
Right. And to be clear, Sunfire is not dead in the books.
In
right?
Fire and Blood.
In Fire and Blood at this stage of the book. And it's very odd that the only indication we've gotten that Sunfire is dead is this phrase that Kristen Cole said of it was long in the dying.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Like, we don't see any shot of Sunfire being dead. We don't see anyone else really talk about it as far as I can tell.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an odd decision. But this opening credits tapestry does seem to indicate Sunfire is dead.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see the implications of that. So the episode opens with the Lannister army arriving at Golden Tooth, a castle that bridges the Westerlands and the Riverlands. Jason Lannister, who is the twin of Tylan Lannister, who sits on the Small Council, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Jason Lannister scoffs when Lord Lefford says he has 500 men to add to the army, saying that he has 1,000 knights and 7,000 archers and soldiers ready to go squash Team Black in the Riverlands. But there's a catch. Jason says he won't be moving his army any further east until Prince Aemond brings Vhagar as a backup. Obviously, Aemond is really upset at this because they should just be doing what he says instead of setting conditions.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Kim, what did you make of this sequence and any thoughts on how this played out?
I always love in both Game of Thrones and now with House of the Dragon, whenever we see a new castle or like a new section of Westeros that hasn't yet been brought to life. So I thought it was very fun to kind of be like, ooh, new castle, and then be like, ooh, it's, here we are. It's Golden Tooth. Also the cut to the actual lions in the Lannister cages, I thought was really interesting too. Like, that's such a fun detail of like, yes, lions exist in George R. R. Martin's universe. It's obviously why the Lannisters have their sigil as a lion, because lions are said to have like natively roamed that area of Westeros.
It's interesting how much wildlife Westeros shares with Earth, right? There's cats, there are rats, and pugs.
I know.
Pugs exist in the Game of Thrones universe, and also lions as well. So like now we know. The thing that I was wondering is like, they're using those things in battle. Like how does that even work?
I thought it was more like a threat to like captured soldiers, like, bend the knee or we'll throw you in the lion cage kind of vibe, or just like a little intimidation. Also, like, it's sort of a flex to be like, oh, not only do we have this like exotic creature, but like, we carry around a couple spare ones with our army just because we can. I thought it was fun. Also, like, fun fact that not only do lions exist in Westeros, but there's like a specific breed of white lions that exist in George R. R. Martin's books in Essos. And in A Song of Ice and Fire, Dany, when she goes into the pyre and her 3 dragons are born, she comes out like hairless, like all her hair is actually burnt off her body in that process. The show decided not to go that route because I think putting a bald cap on Emilia Clarke for several seasons would have been a bummer. But in the books, part of what she does while her hair is still growing back is she wears the pelt of this white lion, which is kind of a badass piece of imagery. So yeah, I love that House of the Dragon is bringing in those smaller details from George's universe.
Well, anyway, this brings us to the happenings in King's Landing for the episode. Aemond has assumed his role as Prince Regent and is already taking the brash approach to things. He rages at the idea that Jason Lannister would summon him and insists that Cole and the Green's army go to the Riverlands as the backup instead. Then he tells Tywin Lannister to try and make an alliance with the Triarchy, former enemies of House Targaryen, and he fires his mom, dismissing her from her unofficial seat at the small council. A lot of stuff to discuss here. First of all, one of my favorite parts of this episode is when Aemond makes this suggestion that they ally with the Triarchy, which, as far as I can tell, in the universe of the show, is like a very unruly group of people that you should not try to ally with. And I appreciated how quickly everyone at the Small Council just moved on from that topic of conversation. It reminds me so much of what happens when you are working with an unreasonable boss and they bring up some wild idea. And there's many ways to deal with it. One of it is attack it head on and say, hey, that's a bad idea. And here's why, and here's some data to back up why it's a bad idea. But sometimes that's not effective. Sometimes a much more effective way of just avoiding is just literally, hey, great idea. Let's talk about something else. And like, that's exactly what they're like, oh, hey, whatever. Hey, okay. What about this other idea? And then literally they never address it again. So I appreciated it captured those meeting dynamics really effectively.
I spent time at a union bargaining table for a significant chunk of time, and that we called that strategy "haha anyways."
Yeah.
Where like if something comes up that you just
haha anyways. Yeah.
Sometimes it's more effective to just go haha and
anyways, let's move on to another, and then hopefully they never bring it up again. And that's and sometimes it happens that way. Sometimes that's how it plays out. I was very moved by this moment between Alicent and Aemond. Alicent's questioning a lot of her own parenting decisions throughout the course of this season. And she's wondering, like, was I the one who messed up? Am I the reason why everyone's so messed up today? Is because of my how I raised you kids? And the answer to that question is at least partially yes.
It's the I think you should leave hot dog meme. We're all trying to find the guy who did this, but it's Alicent looking around at her children.
Yeah, I can't tell. There's that scene where was it when Aemond lost his eye, where she insists on taking the eye of one of Rhaenyra's children? Like, I can't tell where these children got their vengeful habits from. Anyway, Jessie Earl, what did you think of this whole scene?
I mean, I loved it for the reasons that you described of like Alicent trying to figure out like her culpability and all of this, but I also really liked it as a culmination of that thing that we saw back in the season premiere where she was talking to Otto about how her voice continually gets undermined in the High Council and how it leads to people not respecting her. And this is kind of the end result of that exact thing. Like her voice has been continually undermined over and over and over and over and over again. To I think the height of it was last episode where she made a play to sort of become the Queen Regent again. And she didn't get it. And at that point, it's just like, well, she just has absolutely no power. Like every single suggestion she makes is just not listened to. And like, I think it speaks to a few things of just like her being her motherhood and just like that aspect of her being sort of like not a beloved figure on Aemon's part, but also I think like, again, we've talked about it a bunch, but just sexism. I mean, I've been in rooms where, this is a common story, but I've had the experience myself where, I will suggest something and people are just like, and then just keep going as if I didn't say it. And then someone will say the same, like dude will say it the same thing and it'll be like, oh, that's a great idea. It's been very interesting as a trans woman too, to experience that. Cause I've noticed a marked shift when after transitioning, I have to like speak louder and more like confidently to be able to be heard just as much. So like that aspect of this, I think really I really did not enjoy seeing for Alicent, but like I think it was depicted very, very well. And you just see her anxiety, and I think she plays it so well too. Like you just see this, like when she's talking to Aemond at the end there, and he sort of made his decision. You see all these tactics that she's going through, where she gets angry at him first, and then there's like a pause after he says this thing, and then she tries to make a empathy play of like, oh, are the problems of your childhood not been sufficiently paid back? I forget the exact way she worded it. Like you just see she's trying everything that she can to just hold on to what little she has, and ultimately she can't do anything. So I just think the scene like carried a lot of interesting weight and is a culmination of just her entire storyline this season of just continually losing her place in this world.
Yeah, amazing points. And certainly I think the unofficial status of her position, I think, is fascinating too, because earlier in the season, she kind of called out Aemond for being in the small council in an unofficial capacity, being like, you aren't actually needed here. But Aegon was like, no, like he's my brother, it's fine. And like we now see how
now he's running the place.
Now he's running the place.
This is like when the executive assistant is now the CEO. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Weren't you just like working in the mailroom not too long ago? Like
yeah. He's the cousin Greg, but like much more deadly.
Someone should make the Office version of House of the Dragon. Is really what this episode is. Just do the entirely same dynamics, but it's just an office setting.
Yeah, just Olivia Cook cut to camera.
I think we all know it would be Tywin Lannister giving the Jim Halpert look at the camera. During those scenes. But anyway,
a good one. I also love when the suggestion that she gets married to a Greyjoy to like help secure their alliance, and how quickly she shut that down.
Yeah.
Like, I think, again, we don't know. They haven't watched Game of Thrones, but we have. And like, that is not a fun place to have to move to. Like, of all the castles and all the vibes to have to transition to. Like, yeah, she's really being given all these miserable options of what to do now that she is just the Dowager Queen. And I think that watching her kind of reflect on how she came to be in that position and sort of try to figure out what to do next has been really fascinating. And I've really liked that for her character this season.
I do like that, even though I agree that her power has been significantly diminished this season, but I do like that she does seem to have some agency. Like she's still able to like shut down ideas like that. Like, you're not marrying me off, and everyone in the council seems to understand they can't really like make her do shit. So like that's the dynamic I get the sense of, at least. Maybe that will change in the next two episodes. But yeah.
Doesn't someone say like, oh well, that's a shame, or some like line like that?
Well, too bad. That could really help us. But they're not like saying like, actually you have to do it. Like
right.
No one is forcing her to do anything. So
yeah, you didn't notice those bags packed in the corner, Allison? You're out of here.
You're out of here. Exactly. They wouldn't dare. They wouldn't dare. That's my sense.
Yeah.
Anyway. At Aemon's next small council meeting, Larys warns him about the Smallfolk's unrest. The secret mission Rhaenyra and Mysaria planned is in full effect as Diana and the brothel madam stage a loud anti-Team Green conversation at the local tavern, spreading the idea that Rhaenyra would be a better ruler. Later, we see that Rhaenyra has sent ships filled with food to the shores of King's Landing, furthering the idea that she is a better monarch. All right, so the idea of like sending food is cool. Like, I like that as a concept, and how, hey, sometimes warfare is fought in ways that aren't just using swords and killing people. Like, there's other ways to wage warfare, and I like that this show is nodding at that. The Smallfolk stuff I still think is pretty clunky. They're kind of like exposition machines in general, in my opinion. But I did like the scene towards the end of the episode when that one dude like takes food from that other poor Smallfolk person.
Oh, yeah, Hugh Hammer.
Yeah, Hugh Hammer's just like, F this, like, I'm taking your food. And it's like, you get a sense of how desperate the situation is and the extent to which people will go to help their families out. But yeah, Kim, how did this whole sort of sequence, this whole storyline work for you?
I appreciated kind of seeing like actually like how the plan was being carried out, because there was just a lot of talk between like Mysaria and Rhaenyra about like what they were doing. We saw Alinda like arrive and and Diana let her in the room, and then finally being like, oh, okay, this is it. It's, staging the loud conversation kind of vibe. It seemed effective to me. I was a little confused if Ulf, who is, you'll remember, like the Targaryen bastard guy, he's like the guy who was in the tavern too, and I was like, is he in on this? I was a little unclear on like whether, like, at first I was like, oh, they just happen to be goading him, who has like this loyalty to Viserys and this idea of what a good king should be, into like helping along the conversation. And then later when he in the streets, when he sees like the sheep cart, that felt to me more like he was like saying the lines that he knew he needed to say type of vibe. So I was a little mixed on like understanding exactly who's in on the plot versus who is just conveniently another Smallfolk person who we've seen who's like helping the plot along.
Well, because we also see Mysaria's henchwoman like infiltrate the city a few episodes ago, right? But then I don't think we see what. Remember, like that woman that's like outside the gates? Yeah, Alinda, right?
Yeah.
But like, do we see her like?
We didn't see her this episode.
To people, like we don't see her like whispering to people or telling them. There's no montage of, "Hey, I heard Rhaenyra is bringing the food and the blah blah." Like there's nothing.
Right.
There's nothing like, so it's like we're only getting a glimpse of what kind of the plan is,
the
right?
extent of the plot.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
And I did when I first just saw like the one boat, I was like, that's not enough food. I was like, that's like dropping off, like a cake at like in front of thousands of people who are starving. And then I was like, okay, there's more boats, but even still, I
had so little faith in the storytelling of the show.
I did. And then there were more boats. But even still, I was like, that's still not enough food. And I was wondering how much they had anticipated the fact that like riots would break out as a result of like not simply like riots breaking out in protest of King Aegon or, Prince Aemond, like the regent's rule, but specifically about the lack of food, even with this like new batch of food that's being sent. Because I'm like, that could easily, like, the pendulum could swing right back the other way and be like, okay, yeah, she sent us food, but clearly not enough food, and people are still getting beat up and potentially killed over, like, now we're fighting over this tiny amount of food. I don't know. I thought it was interesting.
I actually think that was like part of the calculation, right? I would think that like sending just enough for it to seem like she is magnanimous, just to keep using that word. Like she's magnanimous enough to like, she sent like, it's not an insignificant amount of food that she's sending. So people can't argue that she didn't send a good amount of food, but it's also not enough to feed everyone in King's Landing, which is going to like inevitably start a riot. Which, yes, it could go backfire at Rhaenyra and say like, oh, she didn't send enough. But I don't think that like the amount that was sent, I think, is enough to like sort of put the onus back on the king, which people are already feeling, or Aemond, I should say, because people are already feeling angry at him and his the people in King's Landing, because they're not feeding them and keeping them clocked in. So it's just exacerbating pre-existing anger rather than I think there would be any real danger of it being redirected toward Rhaenyra. So I think like it's a calculated amount of food where it's like enough that people would feel like, oh, she's trying, she's sending us food, but not enough that it would actually fix the situation. So it would actually cause these riots.
Yeah, any unrest is advantageous to Team Black, I think, at this point, right? So whether it was meant to be enough or not enough, like either way, it's going to help them out.
Yeah.
So anyway, well played, Team Black. Team Black making some bold gambits, taking some big swings. Not all of them are going to work out, but at least they're trying.
You think,
at least they're trying. So anyway. Larys tries to angle for the title of Hand of the King, but Aemond calls him a toad and orders him to summon Otto Hightower back as hand instead. Master Orwell comes in late, excited to announce that Aegon has regained consciousness. Aemond then visits Aegon and threatens him, ensuring he won't tell anyone what really happened at Rook's Rest. All right, let's talk about this stuff. A lot of stuff going on here. First of all, I really enjoyed this episode's conversation between Larys and Aemond, because he just delivers the sickest burn, no pun intended, possible, where he's like, hey, like, it's kind of like, Kim, I'm looking for like a cool person to come with me to the Taylor Swift concert. Do you know any? It's like
me? I never would have dreamed you would invite me.
Thanks. So, you want me to be head? No, I want you to literally find I want you to literally get the guy that I've already chosen. That's not you.
Yeah.
Pretty sick burn right there. Love that.
Ewan Mitchell's line reading of calling him a toad. Really, I just loved. Like, no, you toad.
Good stuff.
Can I also point
please.
out? I really love this scene, especially in comparison to a scene we'll get later with Laris. Because it showcases how he is treated that way. Because ultimately, yes, Laris is sort of vying for power, and that's what he wants. Like, but so is everybody. Like, he's not unique in that sense. Like, Aemon himself literally almost got his brother killed for his own desire for power. So, like, him calling him a toad, I think is, I don't know, a bit hypocritical, and it's goes to the discussion of ableism that Laris will be discussing later with Daemon. Aegon. Jesus. so many names. Aegon later on this episode. And I think that this scene kind of is there to showcase that. And I really, really like that. It just paints an interesting portrayal of Laris. Because, like, outside of his drawing Alicent into, non-consensually drawing her into his kink, last season, he's a very sort of complicated character because yes, he kind of has that Littlefinger-esque attitude of like, I'm gonna sneak around people and manipulate, but also that's what everyone's kind of doing. He's just smarter about it.
What's Laris's crime, really? Right?
I mean, he did murder his family.
Oh, okay. He's a little bit uglier than all the other people on the show. Okay, and yes, he might have brutally murdered his family, but like, really, is he that much worse than all the other people?
I mean, yeah.
Specifically, Aemon, by the way, who may or may not have participated in family murder himself last episode.
Exactly.
He also has like murdered a lot of the servants and like other people in the castle. Who were like, you know,
layers
among us?
He's got some blood on his hand.
Who among us? Who among us?
True.
Okay, so there is this scene between Aemond and Aegon, and I thought it was really well done. You know, Aegon is just saying, "I don't remember anything. Like, I remember nothing." You know, he like Aegon, by the way, has really smartened up since he was brutally burned at the Battle of Rook's Rest. Like, old Aegon might have played this a little bit differently, where he's insists like, "How dare you, Aemond? I can't believe you did that to me." You know, but Aegon seems to have recognized that the balance of power has shifted. He's in a terrible, treacherous position now, and he insists that he didn't remember anything, and he's like, his life is in danger. Now, Kim, you interpreted this as Aemond threatening him. Like, he takes the little ball and kind of presses it into Aegon's body.
Yeah.
What did you make of that move, like that gesture? What was your interpretation of what was going on there?
It seemed more symbolic for us than for Aegon, if that makes sense. Although maybe not. Like, maybe that was Aemon's way of being like, I am the king now. Like, I have your little ball. Like, but
he gave it to Aegon though.
He like left it with him.
Right.
I think here's my guess.
Yeah.
This is just my straight up guess on this. We saw earlier on in the episode when they're talking about Aegon recovering. Aemond, sorry, names again. Aemond looks and sees Aegon's ball on the table that's still there. And presumably, this is just my guess, that whose ever ball is on the table is still like, those are the people that are at the council. So as long as you have a ball on the table, you're technically still part of the council. And by removing your ball, it is saying like they're no longer part of this power structure at all. So him taking it off and giving it to Aegon is like him symbolically saying, you are done for. I have taken your position. You're out. And it's sort of like a way for him to sort of like tell him without saying it, you're out of the High Council. It's my position now.
That's interesting, Jesse. I had the opposite interpretation, which is that like the little balls, the little marble balls, like belong to different individuals, right? Or like you take your ball and you put it in the little holder, and that's like, hey, now, because when Aemond assumes power, he takes his little ball thing and he puts it into the position of the king, where the king would be. Right?
Yeah.
So then, who knows what ball swapping has happened since then? But like, whatever the case is, Aemond takes some ball, his or Aegon's, and then presses it into Aegon's body in a painful fashion. And I think he's like, from the outside, what is being communicated, like if you're a maester watching, your interpretation might be, oh, that's so nice. He's giving him back his ball so that Aegon can resume his position on the High Council. But it's the way in which he's doing it that is telling the story, which is he's not being nice about it. He's actually doing it in a way that will like grievously injure or hurt Aegon. So that's my interpretation. It was like, from the outside, he was doing the quote unquote right thing of giving him back his ball. But then like the actuality is he is hurting him. Right? Like physically hurting him. So
I think what we need is like an understanding of how those balls work.
Yes,
like,
no one has been told. No one has explained. No one has explained.
No.
We need like a overlaid text every time we're in the small council, being like arrows pointing to each ball and explaining like what the balls mean.
What I want is just like a History Channel documentary about the ball, like the ceremony of the balls. Is
yes.
Ancient rite in Westeros.
Well,
HBO, please drop
those
the ball.
Are two, hopefully plausible explanations for what was going on in that scene. Anything else about this scene before we move on? I think it's just it's interesting how Aegon has really wised up, and now I guess a near-death experience will do that to people. It will make them realize what their actual true standing is. So anyway,
also like this has got to be his worst hangover ever. Like, he went into that battle drunk and probably woke up hungover and dying and having a lot of come to Jesus moments. Yeah, I remember nothing. That's my claim to fame.
Yeah,
gosh, poor Aegon.
Indeed. What else happens this episode? Alicent spends time reflecting on her children and why they are the way they are. She tearfully apologizes to Aegon in his sickbed and asks her brother Gwaine about her youngest child, Daeron, wondering if he's a better adjusted man because he was raised far away from her and the King's Landing court. So, as we talked about earlier, this episode is partially about Alicent realizing maybe she didn't do the best job of raising these children, and she's really questioning herself. Kim, any reactions on what Alicent's storyline was this episode?
Yeah, I appreciate that she's finally having some like serious self-reflection going on. I feel like for a while her character has been, sometimes by necessity, like in denial of exactly what her role has been in like the deterioration of everything in this conflict. We've seen her kind of turn to her religion at times for sort of either absolution or for comfort. And like now she's ultimately, going to her brother and her own family. And like, she even kind of tried to talk to, I think, like Maester Orwild before about like Viserys. And I think that we're seeing her sort of try to find her port in the storm here, because clearly it's not going to be her children, which again is like in pretty stark contrast to Rhaenyra, who seems to be able to speak pretty openly with Jace whenever she is feeling attacked from within her council or from within the people who are supposed to be loyal to her. And yeah, I've really appreciated that arc that they're working with here for Alicent. And I find it very moving. I think Olivia Cook is crushing it in this role. Like her ability to kind of go between like anger, panic, sadness, self-loathing, trying to seek absolution. I think it's been really great to see.
I felt like Gwaine was really not particularly understanding. Like, what's your interpretation of their dynamic? Either of you? Like, I didn't think Gwaine was really into the whole reminiscing thing this episode. Did you get that vibe as well, or is that just me?
I thought the scene was really warm.
Okay.
I mean, there was a little coldness to it at the beginning, but I think towards the end, I think as he started to see what his sister was feeling, he tried to open up and like tell her like, "Oh, your son is kind," and you saying like, "Oh, you tried your best here." I think he was trying to be kind. And what I kind of also like about it too is like they're technically like, relation. They have their siblings. and yet they do have a distance between them because of the distance of where they've lived for so long, which kind of speaks to like the distance that a lot of family members have to live with in this world, which I think is kind of an interesting parallel there. So yeah, I do see it as like he wasn't really into it towards the top of the scene, but as he saw her anguish and like what she was going through, he tried to like reach out and be a little bit warmer to her. So
yeah,
we also learned this scene that Otto is kind of ghosting Alicent, not responding to her messages. Otto has theoretically been called to be the hand of the king, like the Prince Regent Aemond or whatever, right? Which is kind of a big decision. Honestly, I have to say, I'm a little surprised by it because Otto is like a thoughtful dude, and I guess like his claim to fame for Aemond is he's anti-Aegon, so that is positive for Aemond. But I can't imagine that Otto would approve of a lot of what Aemond is doing right now. So I'm kind of an interesting choice for me why Aemond would want to go with Otto as the hand of the king, you know?
yeah.
I don't know if either of you have any thoughts on that, but that was another thought I had watching the show. It was like, okay, like David Chen, support Otto as the hand of the king. He seems like logical choice, but like I don't know why Aemond would want him necessarily. Anyway,
my thing is like Aemond is not necessarily an authoritarian in the sense that like he's not willing to listen to other opinions. Like he's aggressive and he's kind of an asshole and can be very like quick to want violence. But I don't think he's necessarily against people speaking, having a differing opinion than him, as opposed to someone like Joffrey, who again would be like, if you speak out against me, I'll torture you, burn you, do whatever, because it's me, or my way or the highway. And so I think like he has respect for Otto as like his grandfather and someone who is like fairly outspoken, and he kind of like respects that, rather than like wanting someone who will be sort of a like say whatever I want him to hear kind of viewpoint. At least that was my impression. It's like I don't agree with him always, but I respect the guy. As opposed to Laris, who he kind of sees as a toad, who's like, oh, you sort of like you say whatever someone wants you to hear in the moment, like that sort of thing.
Yeah, like when one of his first orders of business was like cut down the rat catchers, that was a very like, yeah, I recognize what Otto recognized in the error of Aegon's ways type of vibe. So yeah, but I wasn't quite sure what to make of the fact that Alicent is saying that, because I feel like Otto and Alicent left on terms of being like, yeah, I gotta go be in Hightower for now, but not like, and I shall never speak to you again, daughter, because like you have messed up too badly. Like I thought it was much more like, yeah, okay, I have to leave King's Landing, but like let's try to forge ahead. So
they ended on good terms, I thought, you know. So so it honestly makes me think something is wrong with Otto, like something has happened to Otto, you know. That was my reaction. Yeah, or
that there's some plan going on that is going to be revealed, like that he's up to something that for whatever reason needs to be withheld from Alicent and everyone else right now. I don't know. I also love that we got another vocab word in this scene, salubrious. Had to Google that one. Means health giving, healthy. So yeah, King's Landing is not a healthy place to live for anyone, and yet it's the capital of this entire country.
But it is a healthy place for SAT analogy sections, because you'll know all the vocab you need for this. All right. Anyway, Alicent and Helena get caught up in the food riots outside the sept that they usually pray at. Though mere weeks ago the Smallfolk were crying on behalf of them during Jaehaerys' funeral procession, now they are throwing fish at Alicent and yelling that Rhaenyra is the rightful queen. A king's guard cuts the hand off of a man who grabs at Alicent, and the mob overwhelms the knights as the queens make their escape. One of the things I like about the episode and about Game of Thrones / House of the Dragon in general is that sometimes you have a scene that starts to play out in a way that like seems to grow exponentially out of control, and you as the viewer literally don't know where it could end. Like, because this show and this whole franchise has shown they will kill these characters off without even thinking about it, like without even hesitating. And so this scene starts fairly innocently. They're like, hey, we got to get you guys out of here. And then every single moment is this escalation of like the guy grabs her, you know, her by the arm, and then some guy cuts that guy's hand off, and then you know, and then it's like they're running away, and like they've cornered Helena, and like is something terrible like is one of them gonna die? You know, like all this stuff, all these questions start swirling, and you both already know what happens, or presumably who lives and who dies. Like me watching, I'm like, literally both of these characters could be dead by the end of the scene, and I don't know. Of course, they both survive. Only like one guy loses his hand, and the Kingsguard seems to be killed in the process. But that happens multiple times this episode. Of like something happens, and then like things like escalate out of control in a way that you don't anticipate, and then like anything could happen at that point. Anything could happen, and it's that sense of danger that I think this show is really good at conveying. And I definitely got it from this scene. So
anyone could kiss. Anyone.
That's right.
Might die, might make out. We don't know.
That's
We're
right.
on our toes.
Absolutely.
Might make out then die.
Yeah, sometimes it's one followed by the other. And not in the order you might think sometimes. Anyway. Yeah,
might die then make out. Which actually Game of Thrones have done.
Yeah, exactly. So any thoughts on this sequence?
I think it was very tense. I agree with you. Like, even me knowing who lives and who dies and what would happen in this sequence generally, like, very tense sequence. It escalated really, really well. Like, one particular moment that I found really stressful was when they do get sort of the queens sort of get cornered and they're up against that grating on the wall. And you can see there's like spikes on that grating, and they're like pressed by the crowd there. And I was almost just like, again, I knew neither of them were going to die, but if I didn't, I would almost be like, what a horrible way for someone to die, that like just kind of like squished by a crowd against spikes on a wall. And I thought that was very possible to happen. So like just the staging of all of this, it was just a very tense scene and very well done.
I also like the fact that they named the night. The one it seems to me like only one of the Kingsguard really got taken down by the mob there. Although like they were outnumbered enough that I was like, more damage could be done here for sure.
Yeah.
But they called out specifically like Eastermont, and that the House Eastermont is a minor house within Westeros that George R. R. Martin came up with. Their sigil is a turtle, which is a little like Easter egg reference to the way that George R. R. Martin came up with the entire A Song of Ice and Fire series, because when he was a little kid, he would go, I guess like stores back then, like pet stores would just sell like little like dime turtles, like little baby turtles, and he would have them in a little container, but apparently they died very frequently because that's just what happens. It's kind of like the sad fish that you can get from like Petco that just die very fast, have a short little lifespan. And he, I guess, would come up with reasons and stories for why all of these turtles were dying in such rapid succession, and that led to his tales of A Song of Ice and Fire, in which, as we were just discussing, many characters die very frequently, and sometimes for seemingly no reason at all. And so fun little turtle reference there with Eastermont. R.I.P. to all the turtles of George R. R. Martin's youth and that night of the Kingsguard.
I'm just gonna put this out there. Martin did not take care of his turtles very well.
I was gonna say, I don't know that they're supposed to die that quickly, Kim. Maybe it is possible to, you got to change the water out of those fish tanks and
I don't
feed
know.
them. Like they're not just like set and forget creatures. Do you know what I'm saying? That's all I wanted.
But I also think sometimes some pet stores sell these animals that are like not bred super well, or like are just kind of like
eugenics turtle stuff.
Whoa! Wow, yeah, really didn't. I'm seeing a whole new side of Kim.
I don't shop at Petco because of the massive.
So
deaths.
You're elitist too.
I am.
Petco's too good for you.
I didn't know that Kim was such a turtle Nazi here.
Oh dear God!
She believes in the superiority of some turtles, I guess.
Oh my God! No more fun facts for me.
Some turtles are bred for power.
Yeah, good times. Okay. It does seem as though, right, like Alicent and Helena get away pretty unscathed. Like Alicent has this like cut on her arm, I think is what we see, right?
Yeah.
But that's basically it.
Which I love that little detail because it parallels the slice she gave Rhaenyra back in season 1 in that Driftmark episode when Aemond lost his eye, and Alicent wound up kind of coming at Rhaenyra with the Valyrian, A Song of Ice and Fire prophecy dagger, and they had their little showdown. Yes. That was like the only blood officially drawn between Alicent and Rhaenyra themselves so far. And so I'm I wonder if Alicent was also reflecting on, you know, the snowball effect of all that has happened between their families and how she came to be there.
Rhaenyra was able to strike back, albeit extremely indirectly, by seeding a lot of dissatisfaction with her son's rule and then feeding them and stoking discontent.
Who knows? Alinda might have told one Smallfolk, hey, if you get near Alicent, make sure and give her a little... A little 6-inch slice on the forearm.
Slice right there. At
super symbolic.
At this exact spot. She's going to really think about that for a while. So, anyway.
Psychological warfare.
Final thing about Team Green this episode, Larys visits Aegon in his sickbed. Larys tells the nurse not to give Aegon his pain medicine for an hour, and then talks to the young king about what his future will be like as a disabled man in this realm. He kind of tells a story about his foot and how, like, when he was born, his foot was so twisted. His father named it sorcery, and the scene kind of ends with Aegon asking Larys for help, and we're unclear on what exactly that means. Jessie Earl, what were your thoughts on this scene?
I mean, I love this scene. I kind of referenced my comparison to it with the earlier scene with Larys, but I thought this was a really good look at ableism within this world. Like, we've been talking a lot about patriarchy and sexism and all of that stuff throughout this series, but that also conflates with ableism. Like, if you're not this perfect dude, like, there's this ideal guy that the society has, and if you don't fit that, you're ostracized in shape, way, shape, or form. And this also reminded me a lot of Tyrion as well. Like, Tyrion as a child was also sort of like thought to be like some sort of like a witch did it to him that caused him to be a little person and things like that. So like I think that it just goes to that, how all these things kind of come together. Like, when, you know, patriarchal world, ableism is not very far behind, racism isn't very far behind, and is often conflated with it. So yeah, I thought this was very good, and I liked Larys relating to Aegon and having this moment of like, oh, you can be smarter now, like that's going to be your weapon. And I think that that's an interesting angle for Aegon, considering he was the one who's just like, I don't want to read books, I just want to do action now. It's like, now he has to change, and he has to sort of use his mind and grow his mind. I just thought it was an actual, I think, a very needed emotional scene with Larys, because Littlefinger, one of my favorite characters in Game of Thrones, but he didn't often have moments of vulnerability, and when he did, it was usually creepy towards women, like Sansa,
or Catelyn.
So, yeah, exactly. So here there's like a moment where like there's probably a little play for power of like, I'll get in good with the king because now I'm out with the other guy, the Prince Regent, so I'll get in good with him. But it also did feel like an earnest, vulnerable moment that he was having here. So I thought that it just again, Larys, not the best dude, but this does like give him some interesting layers that I like.
Well put, Jessie. Kim, any thoughts on this scene?
I just wanted to note the little nod that they give, I believe intentionally here, to Alice Rivers, like finally sort of linking what's happening at Harrenhal back to some of our characters in the other parts of Westeros. Because when Larys says that, you know, my foot was so twisted that my father named it sorcery, and he even accused a member of our household of maligned spells, I'm pretty sure that that member of their household he's referring to is Alice Rivers, because again, the Strongs were the previous lords of Harrenhal. That is where Larys was born, as he mentions. And Alice Rivers has been there acting as this sort of like maester / wet nurse, which I don't know how many people know about this, but a wet nurse is a real thing in our world, but also within Westeros. Lords, the ladies of the realm, like highborn women, do not nurse their babies after they are born. We actually saw specifically them pull this into the narrative when Rhaenyra gave birth back in season 1, and instead of breastfeeding her baby, she was given like a medieval ice pack for her boobs, basically to relieve the pain of feeling that her milk was coming in but not being able to actually feed her children, because babies are nursed by other women, aka wet nurses. And so there's a rumor in Fire and Blood that Alice Rivers was the wet nurse to both Larys and Harwin. And so she would have been around in their childhood in Harrenhal. And so given that she's the one doing all of these witchy things. I'm pretty sure that the show is letting us know that Alice Rivers is not just like this random character that Damon is interacting with, but also has a history with the Strong family.
As a non-book reader, did not pick up on that.
Yeah, it was a subtle one.
Yeah, but yes, any connection between the Damon storyline and everything else that's happening is appreciated in this show. Yeah, I agree. It was like a nice tender moment between Laris and Aegon. I just got darker undertones from it personally. Like I guess just because of how Aegon has been depicted until now, I wasn't feeling like, oh, this is where Aegon's going to turn it all around. You know, like he's gonna use his innate gifts to his own advantage or whatever. Like. Or capitalize on his weaknesses or whatever. You know, basically the Aegon that I have known from the show is not going to take this well, and it will probably cause him to spiral or make even worse decisions. But I leave open the possibility that that's not the case, and maybe this will be a turning point for that character.
It's interesting because I did have I had the opposite interpretation. I did think that this felt like a significant enough trauma that he would change. Then again, considering there's other real world conversations about like traumatic moments to politicians might cause them to change their points of view on the world, and I've disagreed with that. So maybe your read is better.
we all know that in real life, when a politician experiences a traumatic moment, it causes them to change their tone
completely change their point of view.
Their point of view.
Specifically, an attempted assassination, which is what Aegon is after.
I wasn't even thinking about that. That's what a random thing to bring up, Kim. I wasn't even thinking about that analogy. Anyway, all right. So that is what happens with Team Green in this episode. All right, let's talk about Team Black. This episode's main focus is on the various riderless dragons of the realm. Rhaenyra tries and fails to get one of her Queensguard knights, Sir Steffan Darkland, to claim Sea Smoke. I mean, let's just talk about that. Okay, like I thought that I was actually like moved. I almost had like a little bit. I almost got a little misty when she recruits this guy Steffan Darkland to try to mount the dragon, and his devotion is so unwavering. And even though there's that shit ass guy in her small council that's like, actually, this is a bad idea. You know, he's like, F that guy. Like, this is a great honor to even be asked. He understands the risks. He's like, whatever, if I die, like, at least I died trying to like save the kid. You know, I was very moved to see this guy. You know, I wish I believed in anything as much as Steffan Darkland believes in Queen Rhaenyra. You know, that was kind of my reaction to that. But yeah, Sir Steffan's dragon claiming attempt ends with Sea Smoke blasting him to death along with two of the dragon keepers. Pretty brutal. Now, did you two, you know, we'll talk a little bit more about this in bonus episode, but did you two know that this would happen, like, and that it would happen in this way? It sounds like yes. Okay,
yeah. It was. I was with you. Like, they did this so well, and even knowing what was coming, like, as I knew exactly what was coming for this guy, and I'm like, no, you poor baby. No, he was so sweet. Like, it was just, they did it so well to just deliberately tug at your heartstrings, especially the moment where he's like, I did it, and I'm like sitting there like, no, poor baby, no, you did not.
I was also like, don't say that before you've actually done it. You're not on the dragon.
And then when the one dragon keeper like slit his own throat.
Oh
that
God.
was rough.
That was metal.
Yeah, right? Got burned by a dragon, then slit my own throat. Like, there's no better way to go out, man.
Right.
I was also like, it reminds me of like, you know, like sending the astronauts with like suicide pills. Like, it's like all the dragon keepers presumably have a knife within arm's reach because like it's the odds of you getting burned alive are high, so you might as well be able to quickly end your suffering.
Right. I'm just gonna put this out there, by the way. Like, it is only with shows of the production values of House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones where it actually looks like they set people on fire for this. Like, I'm being 100% serious. Like, and they've done this in the past. I think. In the
Spoils of War episode.
The Spoils of War episode in Game of Thrones, right? I think it set a record for the most number of stunt people that they set on fire at once.
Yeah.
So it's like they know how to set people on fire in this series.
Believably.
And believably, and it looks like they actually did it, and it looks awesome. And so
shout out to the stunt guys.
Shout out to the stunt guys, shout out to the production people who like made this look pretty realistically like 2 people actually got lit on fire and died horribly. Underrated, skill to like pull that off. And it does not look like it's CG fire in my opinion. Like it was probably augmented with some CG fire, but it looks like they actually set these people on fire. And so bravo to the people who make the show. Okay, just wanted to throw that out there.
Did you see the Fall Guy, the movie?
I did.
There's that one sequence where they set him on fire over and over and over and over again. And that remind me of that.
Yeah. I mean, the stunt people, they do.
Yeah,
a lot
they
of,
do.
They put their lives in danger so we can have a moment of entertainment.
Give them an Oscar category, folks.
Absolutely. Anyway, Kim Renfro, any thoughts on how this Darkland storyline played out?
I loved the return of this sort of dragon lullaby that we have here, or like dragon calming summoning song. This is the same song that we heard Daemon singing to Vermithor back in the season 1 finale. It's a song that was written specifically for House of the Dragon, and I just think it's neat to have that sort of lore brought back in, and sort of see that like there's a history to the way that humans have been trying to relate to the dragons and attempt to control them, and clearly there's certain success in that, and then we see how quickly it can turn. And like I mean, I was joking about it, but like I really do wonder if Stefan saying out loud, like basically like claiming the success of that bond before it had officially happened, was the thing that made Sea Smoke be like, no man, fuck you. Like like no, you didn't do it yet, because like it didn't seem to me like Sea Smoke was trying to like trick him into getting closer before he burned him. It felt like Sea Smoke was responding to Stefan speaking in that moment.
You're saying Sea Smoke can sense hubris is a I'm just gonna put this out there. The way in which he was approaching Sea Smoke was comically slow.
Not confident.
It was not they're like, hey, you must show no weakness, you can't show fear. And the way he's walking towards him, he's literally taking like 1-inch steps towards him. I'm like, dude, this is not the way to go.
Yeah,
like they tell you when you're like attacked by a bear, make yourself loud and seem large. And it's like you can't be like, hey, if they sense weakness, they're gonna pounce.
Right.
And the way he was walking towards him, it felt like it did not convey a lot of confidence. And so maybe it was a combination of those two things, Kim. Maybe it was a combination of the kind of baby steps and also claiming victory before it actually happened. So
because in Fire and Blood, George writes that, like, he says, dragons are not horses. They do not easily accept men upon their backs. When angered or threatened, they attack. So I was kind of like, did Sea Smoke get a little angry at Sir Stefan in that moment?
There's all these viral videos online of people who are running in marathons or track events, and they get to like 130 feet before the finish line, and they're like, "Oh, I already see it," and they start celebrating prematurely, and then somebody else like runs past them and takes first place, and it's like, this is like that, except instead of someone else taking first place, Darkland was torched to death. So that's
yeah.
I also got to give a shout out to Emma Darcy's reactions to this whole thing. Like, everyone's clearly they are horrified by this whole thing, and you can sense that like everyone would be really disappointed at this outcome. So yeah. All right. Yeah. Anyway, what else happens this episode? So in the Vale, Rhaena looks after Joffrey and his baby dragon Tyraxes and discovers a larger unclaimed dragon has been hunting nearby. Who is that? Like, what's the deal there? I guess we're not supposed to know, right? Like, but it's kind of just introducing, like, there's another dragon probably that has been like unnamed, right? Like, that we don't know of, or that has not been identified, or maybe it's Vermithor on the weekends. Like, what do we what's like what is the implication there?
Some other dragons getting drunk too, blacking out.
Yeah.
Oh man, I destroyed the veil last night.
I have a theory. I have a theory about which dragon
I think I know
this is from
Okay.
Fire and Blood, but it would mark a change. And again, going back to our nice convo last week about George and his feelings about the show, because George R. R. Martin went out of his way in this blog post last week, not only to correct everyone about like, yes, there are wyverns in my universe in addition to dragons. No, the Targaryen sigil shouldn't have 4 legs, etc. But he specifically was like, the dragons of Westeros do not wander far away from Dragonstone, and like it would be ridiculous if they were just like flying around everywhere. He specifically says like you won't find dragons hunting in the Riverlands or the Reach or the Vale. And so I think that the fact that House of the Dragon has this large wild dragon who is clearly hunting in the Vale, that's why there are sheep carcasses or some sort of animal carcasses, I think means that the show has made a departure from his books, and I can guess what it is. It's not, so
let's talk about it. We'll talk about it in bonus.
Go into it in the bonus episode for sure.
Yeah.
But I just, in the scene in general, not only the like allusion to this larger dragon and sort of like the ominous idea of a big dragon flying around just burning things for fun in the Vale. I loved seeing what I believe is baby Stormcloud dragon. It was like seeing like dragon puppies, you know, like the big dragons are sometimes like, you can tell that they have a little personality, they have a bond to their rider, et cetera, et cetera. You can really sort of see how special this is with like this baby dragon who's effectively like playing with like the younger this is Aegon the Younger and Viserys, Rhaenyra's 2 youngest children that she had with Daemon, who are in this scene, and one of them has their baby dragon Stormcloud. So yeah, I just thought that was precious. I love the little sounds.
And we'll see how that ends up playing out. I'm kind of interested to hear what you have to say about that in the bonus episode at decodingtv.com. I wanted to read a quick email from Casey writing into acastofkings@gmail.com. I was a big fan of Raised by Wolves and was there's a TV show on Max or HBO Max called Raised by Wolves.
Great show.
And was extremely bummed when it was canceled. It was a pleasant surprise to see Abu Bakr Salim, who played Father, show up as Alan of Hull in the early episodes of season 2, and now in episode 5, Amanda Collin, who played Mother, shows up as Lady Jane Eyre. She was also recently in the film The Promised Land with Mads Mikkelsen, which I highly recommend. I know it's covered on the film cast, but hopefully more people who listen to Cast of Kings are encouraged to check it out. Anyway, just thought it was a fun little connection to a great show. I wish you're still around. Love the podcast. Keep up the great work. End quote. But yes, I realized, there is a Raised by Wolves reunion on the show, although those characters never see each other. But yeah, the woman who plays Mother and the guy who plays Father in Raised by Wolves, they're both on this season of House of Dragons. So very cool stuff.
That mean we're gonna get some more dad jokes?
Yeah. Perhaps. By the end of the episode, Seasmoke ends up flipping the script and claiming Adam as a rider on him, right? So yeah, we are led to understand that Adam is the one reportedly riding Seasmoke at the end of the episode. Before his dramatic dragon scene, we get a better understanding of his and Alan's strained relationship with their absent Lord Father. The pair discuss how Corlys will never acknowledge them as his children, even though he's promoting Alan to first mate. This episode is basically making it clear now that both Adam and Alan are Corlys' children. Although they have different feelings about it, Adam is seeking out some type of glory or approval under the Valyrian name, while Alan seems resentful, as if he'd rather be left alone. We also see Alan shaving his head to hide the fact that he has white hair, which would give him away. And I gotta say, I have never related more with a House of the Dragon character than in this moment. And let me tell you, folks, if you're not watching the video version of this, which you should be, at youtube.com/@decodingtv, I shave my head. You know, I'm basically bald, and I didn't realize how much work it takes to be bald. Like, I have no, like, I shaved so I have no hair, and you know, I used to like let it grow out a little bit and like have a little fuzziness on the top, but then like it started kind of growing back in disproportionately in some regions versus others, and so just like it's just better to have it shaved all. Like I prefer the look of it shaved all the time, and you just got to do it very often. You got like once every like day or two, you got to just shave the head.
Wow.
And to keep it looking like this. And I don't even think this is like peak male performance or anything, but it's just like just to keep it at a place where it's acceptable. It takes a lot of work. So I can't imagine doing this without modern razor blade or electric razor technology, which is what Alan needs to deal with.
Yeah. So, or a good mirror. Like it took me a second to be like, oh, he is somehow seeing his reflection in that plate. Like, dang.
I'll also say it's a very distinctive look to have like white hair coming out of a bald head like that. And so you can really understand why he'd really want to keep that kept, to keep it shaved in order to not give away his situation. But anyway, so some big things happen in here where Sea Smoke is claiming a writer. This is a different dragon than the one we saw earlier in the episode, right? We saw Vermithor earlier in the episode, right?
No, it was Sea Smoke.
Oh, that was Sea Smoke. Okay. So Sea Smoke is like, I've had such a bad experience with this Darkling guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to seek out a writer right away. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Unprecedented, as far as I know, in the realm of dragon bonding within this story. I think that I loved, again, talking about like big picture reaction to this episode. I loved how much time we spent with different dragons in different situations throughout this episode, and all the Sea Smoke stuff was surprising to me. I knew how the Darkling thing would play out. I did not know how Sea Smoke and Adam would come face to face, and the fact that Sea Smoke like harassed him into like bonding with him, I thought was fascinating, and also just to me surprising as a book reader, because we haven't really ever gotten the indication that dragons would aggressively seek out a bonded writer in that way. And I have so many questions. I'm like, had Sea Smoke been like spying on Adam this whole time and been like, no, I think that guy is going to be my next writer.
That guy's got something. That guy's
fishing for good clam soup. I want in on the recipe. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Like how is Sea Smoke able to sense the presence of this guy? It seems like dragons aren't really into consent, is what I would say.
You're riding me, dang it.
Yeah, in terms of who's riding them?
Oh, I was just going to say it. I mean, it goes towards the thing of like the bloodline stuff, and they don't want to be acknowledged as Corliss's sons. Or, well, one of them does, the other doesn't. And this is a way that kind of be like, yeah, we are of your bloodline, because Corliss's bloodline can ride dragons, so.
Right. And I mean, in terms of Sea Smoke sort of being able to sniff out Adam, it does not seem to me outside of the realm of possibility, again, with like the bloodline and the magical relation of dragons and their riders, that Sea Smoke somehow knows that Adam is Laenor's half-brother. So Laenor was the previous rider of Sea Smoke. Laenor, to our knowledge, is alive, but was just faked his death and went off to go live in Essos, leaving Sea Smoke behind. And then, we saw earlier in the season Rhaenyra saying that Sea Smoke had suddenly been behaving restlessly. I've seen some people theorize that this might mean that Laenor has died, like that something might have happened to him off in Essos, and then Sea Smoke, that made Sea Smoke suddenly become restless and be like, oh no, like, I really don't have a rider anymore. I need to go find a new one. And somehow was able to sense that Adam and Laenor shared a father. And so, but again, who knows why it was Adam and not Alan. That all adds to the mystery of what George R. Martin has said. He has said that he will explain more about how dragon bonding works in his upcoming books. But for now, we don't have a ton of concrete detail on like the exact sort of recipe for this. And so I thought it was a very exciting thing to sort of watch Sea Smoke be like, no, you, not that, boo, Darkling, yay, Adam. But like with this like massive dragon. It's cool. I want to be chosen by a dragon.
Let's talk about this one scene between Mysaria and Rhaenyra this episode. After growing closer as queen and advisor through the last few episodes, Mysaria finally tells Rhaenyra the origin story of her neck scar and reiterates her loyalty during an evening chat. Rhaenyra embraces her mistress of whispers, and the contact seems to trigger deeper intimacy between them. The hug slowly turns into a makeout session, interrupted only by the urgent news about Seasmoke's new rider. You know, I have a lot of different feelings about this scene. I will say the first feeling I felt was I was actually moved because Rhaenyra embraces Mysaria after Mysaria basically is one of the few people that's able to engage Rhaenyra as an actual person as opposed to just the queen. And I found that to be very powerful. She's like, I'm talking with all these fools and like no one trusts me. My son doesn't trust me. My council doesn't trust me. Like no one even sees what I'm trying to accomplish. And the fact that Mysaria like says like I believe in you, I see the struggles you're going through, and is doing so without really any ulterior motives, I think really resonates with Rhaenyra. And I just felt like when she embraces her, it's like, oh, that's so nice that like they have this kind of shared moment of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So that was nice. And then they start making out. You know, it's hot, but also it's like, oh, like I don't feel great about this for a wide variety of reasons. Like, first of all, speaking of consent, like, you know, difficult to have consent in an employer queen / mistress of whisper situation, you know, like Mysaria can't really say no to this, but also obviously if someone catches them, which almost happens, could create some big problems for them. So anyway, had a whole roller coaster there, guys. Had a whole
It was a roller coaster.
Yeah.
I did not think that they were gonna go there, and even I thought it was like paced so fascinatingly. But yeah, like Rhaenyra sort of like turns her head very slightly, and
right.
I was like, oh. And then I was like, oh, is that are we just having a little awkward hug here? And then it kept going, and then I was like, oh, like,
yeah, that was
they're kissing.
My exact reaction. I kept yelling, interesting at the screen as I was watching. I loved this. I actually really, really like it because I agree there is consent issues given the power dynamics, and I guess they do try to smooth it a little bit with like her line of, you see me as an equal earlier on in the scene. Yeah. So I think there's some sort of like attempt to try to acknowledge that, but there is a power differentiation there that is there. That being said, I really do like this for numerous reasons. One, I do think that these characters, like, they built it up well enough that I feel like this feels natural. Of like Rhaenyra feeling isolated and Mysaria like actually acknowledging her humanity, seeing her, and seems to be the only person in her entire life to really do so. We also know that Rhaenyra has had some, we even talking about, I think like last episode about like or 2 episodes ago, the sort of sapphic feelings between her and Alicent from their youth that never really ever seemed to get actually expressed. So this feels like comes out of that very well. Yeah. And then just in a larger sense, you know, I feel like this is a much better representation of queerness than we got last season, where we just had like 2 characters that were defined, like the first thing we know and pretty much only thing we know about the characters are they're gay before one of them gets gay bashed to death. And it just seems to use gayness as like a tragedy storyline of like, look at how queer people are treated, which is using gay storylines simply for trauma, and the bury your gay storyline is a problematic trope for numerous reasons. So like I like this storyline way better because it feels natural and it comes from 2 characters have a lot of other stuff going on and are not solely defined by this relationship, but one that feels like it naturally fits. And then also it's nice for the actor, like they are getting to actually represent queerness on screen, considering they are non-binary. Emma Darcy. So yeah, I think that this is on every level. I was super. I love this entire sequence. So
yeah, I loved it too.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm also a big fan of the sequence just because I was talking earlier about how like stuff is spiraling out of control in this episode multiple times, and this is one of those times where I'm like, oh, where is this going to go? And like, is this going to lead to danger for any of these characters?
Yeah.
And speaking of Emma Darcy, my favorite part about this episode was the look on their face right after the Queensguard comes in. And Queen Rhaenyra has this look of just like try to play cool, try to be cool,
be chill.
You know, and it's like it's clearly like extremely uncomfortable. It's almost comic. It's verging on comical. Is when she, you know, Queen Rhaenyra is like in this like state of like I've been caught, but also like I need to play it off like I haven't been caught, and the Queen's Guard kind of gives this look at Miss Arya that's very ambiguous of like whether they actually saw anything. I think so.
Yeah.
Anyway,
the consent issue I think is important and did occur to me as well, because like not only does that power dynamic exist, period, but like the fact that this happened so like basically in response to Miss Arya opening up about having this awful sexual trauma as a child, I was sort of like, oh, like that's not always the time that I want to be kissed. And I do feel like I could feel a sort of stiffness from Miss Arya at first, like when
when she gives when Rhaenyra hugs Miss Arya, like Miss Arya doesn't even like greet the hug, because I think Miss Arya is so like taken aback by this. You know, she doesn't expect to be hugged by the queen, right?
And then like, you know, upon a second watch, I do feel like at least like physically I got the sense that they're both equally into it once like the kiss really gets going. But it is a fascinating parallel, or like just link back to what happened between Rhaenyra and Criston Cole, because like this is not the first time that Rhaenyra has made physical intimacy with a close member of her court, an employee. Right. And that obviously went horribly for her. So it is, I think, a super interesting layer to her character, and I was very, very pleasantly surprised that the show fully went there explicitly with having Rhaenyra be, you know, bisexual, pansexual, have this queerness to her character, because as we discussed, you know, there was a lot of implicit layers to it in season 1 and in these childhood scenes. You know, the actresses who played young Rhaenyra and young Alicent talked about the intentionality of that romantic vibe happening between them, but I thought I was kind of resigned to the idea that you know, HBO and Ryan Condal and the House of Dragon writers were going to let that stay as like a sort of like background motivation to their characters. And the fact that they have fully decided to go in on Rhaenyra enjoying the sexual company of both men and women, and having that be, you know, yet another thing that makes her distinct from her peers in this time in a way. I think it also definitely adds to the context of her relationship with Laenor, because like they shared some great scenes back in season 1. You know, one in particular where Laenor expressed like that he resented, I think he said like, I hate that the gods made me the way that I am. He was effectively saying like, I'm resentful of the fact that I am gay, and that, you know, that I have to hide who I am, and that our family has to be facing these outward threats because me and you have not been able to conceive children together. And Rhaenyra has this really great response where she's just like, well, I don't, like, you're a good man, and I love that you're the way that you are, and like I wouldn't change anything about you. And you can see that, you know, she was in a way, I'm sure that Rhaenyra wishes that someone would just say that to her about everything that she wants to do and all of her instincts. And you know, she talks specifically about like how like Daemon's always been able to be like carefree and dangerous, and he was the one who brought her to this brothel where like anyone can be intimate with anyone here type of vibe. And I really appreciate that the show is letting her explore that more explicitly, and I'm very curious to see where they go with this. And I hope it's not simply to more queer tragedy. I hope we get to see a little bit more tenderness between these women on the show.
No relationship in Game of Thrones is ever going to end well, it seems.
That's what I was gonna say. I mean, beautifully said by both of you, but I don't feel like it's gonna end happily ever after for the two of them. That's just my guess.
Sure.
But the thing I wanted to say from that point though is that like what I do appreciate is that like hopefully we'll get more before then. And I do agree with you. Like I want if this is the storyline they're going to go down, I do hope, and I think they will, but I do hope that we get more scenes between the two of them where they get to elaborate upon these feelings and get to express them. Because, as you said, like it's unclear exactly what Miss Arya is feeling of like, is there conflicted feelings about this in the sense of like, I kind of have to kiss you back because of the power difference, or does she see it as a sort of more equal relationship that they have to deal with the burdens of her being queen through. And I think we need those conversations, and also would like to see some moments of like actual their relationship actually being a place of if it is a fully consensual, as best you can in this type of situation, relationship, have there be moments of solace in each other through that before we get to whatever tragedy will befall either character in the future,
Right.
If there is one, because this is just Game of Thrones world, and that's just gonna happen.
Indeed.
Also, I would love to see the look on Damon's face.
Yeah.
He knew that that these two women had decided.
I have
to
a
cut
weird
him
feeling.
out of the throuple.
I have a weird feeling that he would have some weird fetishistic element of it. It's like, can I get in on this? And then they'll be like, no, and then he'll throw a hissy fit.
All right, last but not least, let's get to everyone's favorite plotline of the show, Damon and Harrenhal. He goes through a new series of visions in this episode as he confronts his many mistakes. Alice Rivers advises him to wait 3 days before trying anything new to persuade the River Lords to serve in his army, and then seemingly intervenes by sending Lord Grover Tully to an earlier than natural grave. Damon has a lot of visions. He's back in the throne room, has a vision of Viserys on the Iron Throne. Really cool that we got Paddy Considine back. Okay, I'm not going to lie about that. Like that's cool to have him back. And I will say there is a filmmaking technique called a match cut. And what that is when you see somebody's like body is positioned in a certain way, or an object is positioned in a certain way, cut to the same body or same object is positioned that way, but in a different environment. That's a very crude way of describing what a match cut is, but I'm digging the match cuts. Basically, like you see Damon, he's in this dream environment. Cut to he's like waking up, but his body's in the same. It's like the show's doing a good job of capturing the transition from the sleeping world to the waking world really effectively. All that said, really am not into this plotline myself. Like it's just not really for me. Kim Renfro, what are your thoughts? Like, are either of you getting something out of this that I'm not? Basically, Kim Renfro, what do you think?
I possibly am.
Tell us about it.
I still think that there is room for improvement, perhaps in adding some variety to what Damon is going through. But I truly don't mind spending this time with him being really confronted with his inner demons in a way that very few characters, particularly very few male characters within this story, have been. And I feel like that's what they're trying to do, is have Alice Rivers effectively like torture therapying Damon with blood magic. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, do you guys know, are you familiar with EMDR therapy?
Yes.
It is a specific type of trauma therapy. I've done it. Now I'm like, don't get eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It is a type of therapy where you recall traumatic experiences while engaging your body into a like right left.
Yeah. Well, moving your eyes in certain ways, basically.
Yeah. You can do it with eye movement. I do it. My therapist has me do it with tapping. So like I tap like the right and left sides of my body as I'm like talking through and recalling these things. And it's like you do that once, recalling the traumatic thing and sort of trying to literally for me tap into what are like your negative beliefs and feelings about this thing that happened. Like, what does this memory bring up for you? And then you do it again, but this time you like you insert sometimes like a protective figure, a protective character. I actually sometimes use Brienne of Tarth as like my protective figure who like comes in and helps like reshape the way that thing played out in a way that feels safer or feels better to me. And like literally like I feel like what they're doing with Damon specifically in this scene like almost feels like they're drawing upon that type of therapy use of like the scene with Viserys in the throne room is like word for word the scene from the very first episode of the show when he gets rejected as heir because the way that he decided to handle Emma and Balon's death was by not being with Viserys that night and by not, plugging into those deeper emotions and supporting his brother. And then we see a scene that didn't happen, which is him in the room with Viserys as he's, crying over the body of Emma and Balon. And this time, Daemon does say all the right things and does, is physically there for his brother. And it's almost like he's like redoing the way that entire situation played out. And I found Matt Smith's performance in this episode like very affecting. Like he had multiple scenes where he was like left crying, kind of, either with like what seemed like relief or with just like self-loathing, anger. Like he's really going through it. And I appreciate that like Daemon is not simply like being reduced to this caricature of like, I go my own way and I do whatever I want and I have no regrets about the awful things that I've done, but he's really seeming to be forced to confront his own trauma, the trauma of his family, and like how he has or has not moved through the world in like the most empathetic way up to this point.
All right.
Yeah.
Jesse, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I agree with that. I'm gonna take a sort of middle position on it between the two of you because I agree. I think this scene was probably the most powerful out of all of them, and I have liked this exploration of his regrets and his desire for power that he's always had that has caused him to isolate himself from everybody and everyone around him. That's been kind of the point about this, is like he is so dead set on like, I want to have power, that he's just shoved everyone else away from him in his life. And he's been using his relationships for his own benefit or pushing them away. And this is his sort of like trying to reintegrate that and showing his regrets of that. I really love the moment too, where he goes up to Viserys and he says, you can't still be angry about this. But the way Matt Smith plays it is like, there's just this, like the sense of regret at this of like, you can't still be like, just this sadness of like, this is what he has done to that he still holds this anger. And I thought that was played so well. So I think this is honestly the strongest out of all of the flashbacks that we've gotten with him in these. That being said, it is now 4 episodes, I think, of this, where it's just like, I get it. They're good scenes in isolation, but the pacing of it with his character is so frustrating. And it's just, again, I think it just goes back to like, this is where he is in the book. So they're trying to find ways to use Matt Smith because it's Matt Smith and he is like the big actor for the show that people really love. But as a result, like they just kind of have to keep spinning the wheels of this. And so it's like the scenes are good. And I think it's the best for what they could do with him given the situation. But it's also just sort of like, as a viewer, I'm like, all right, and time for more flashback Matt Smith time. So it was like good scenes in isolation. In the structure and pacing of the season, it is very frustrating.
Yeah. I was like, ooh, he's actually about to leave. Like, he's going to fly away on Caraxes. And then, nope, he's still there.
I have to say, I'm just admitting honestly, like the whole Alice Rivers stuff, like I'm not following. I don't understand. Like I understand like he's in trouble with the River Lords because he's committed some war crimes. He's maybe done a war crime or two, and people are pissed, and he's trying to figure out what to do. And then Alice Rivers is like giving him advice on what to do. And okay, that's fine, but like beyond that, I don't really kind of get her whole deal at this point. So yeah.
I think
thoughts?
That's fair. I keep being surprised that he's like actually talking with her the way that he is, and that like that dynamic seemed to happen so fast of him like of him trusting her with like these like inner thoughts and inner doubts and stuff. Like that feels a bit unearned to me. And just like I'm like, am I just supposed to assume that she is literally like witching him into wanting to talk to her about these things? But because we never see her, like, I wish that we saw her more like on her own or with another character, but it seems intentional that she's only really ever interacting with him because we're supposed to wonder like how real some of these conversations are.
Right. Have we seen her? I guess we might have seen her interact with the
she's been in the
Lord
room.
Tully. Yeah, she's been in the room, right? Okay,
with like Lord, like with like Simon.
Yeah. Okay, so she's not like possibly an imaginary character or anything like that, as far as we can tell.
I don't think so, but I also feel like they want us to be wondering that every time that she pops up. And I'm with you on the fact that it is too much ambiguity with her at this point, and I wish that we had more clarity on exactly what her deal is, what her own motivations are. Because like for her to the implication here being when Simon says like, oh, Lord Grover has died and like all the maesters tried, we even sent Alice and like she was the last one to ply her craft and couldn't do it. And I'm like, okay, so she killed him, which is why she told Damon to just wait. But it's like, whoa, like for a character in her type of position to take that level of like a risk of like potentially being seen as someone who sent the Lord of Riverrun to an early grave, like why is she doing that? What does she think about all this? Like it I'm with you there on that. I think that Alice Rivers is one of the weaker characters right now, and we could use some better oomph from what's going on there. Or like I'm like, is there some twist coming where I'm like in retrospect this is all going to be like, whoa, like that was Alice Rivers all the time. I don't know.
All right. Well, anyway, why don't we wrap up? Let me ask you both, like, overall thoughts, closing thoughts on this episode of House of the Dragon. Jessie Earl, start with you.
I mean, just saying what I've been saying all season, I think this is a really great episode. I think it moves things along really well. It's getting progressed the plot, but had some good interiority to the characters. Yeah. It's some of the best characterization work I've seen done on TV right now. I mean, I just watched The Acolyte right before this, which, great ideas, but terrible characterization of those characters, I feel like. And just going from that to this is like, oh, wow. And just see how well the show does it and puts the work into to even like for earlier where we were talking about like even the scenes where we don't get overt characters saying what they're feeling, we have so much to feed on based on our prior characterizations of them. So love all that. My only frustration, as I just said, is just the Damon stuff working great in isolation but just being paced badly throughout the season. But other than that, another great episode.
Kim Renfro?
I thought this was also a great one in my opinion. I love when House of the Dragon in this case and Game of Thrones before it, I love when it can really surprise me and like keep me in that sort of like adrenaline pumping mode, even though usually I know where things are going. And there were multiple scenes in this episode where I was not sure exactly what was going on, and it was really thrilling to watch the story beats unfold. And the fact that they can do that both with massive CGI dragons and also like Emma Darcy kissing people is amazing, and I want to see more of it. So A+, keep it coming. Thank you,
absolutely.
Hot Tea.
I mean, we were talking about consent between dragons and Ryder, and consent between Queen and Master of Whisperers. So it's all the same, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh God, sorry. That'd be too dirty a joke. Never mind. Sorry. Someone's getting mounted. Apologies.
Oh, nice. Just had to get it out there. I also thought this is a great episode. Like so many awesome, memorable sequences, and again, this feeling of danger that I feel like only this show can deliver. I feel like it really delivered on. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.